Yes, the relay on YouTube. Check it out. Lots of stories about me on there. All the boxing facts and info that you want in a very entertaining, educational manner. The relay. Check it out on YouTube.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay where we're covering today's top boxing news.
Told her I support her. So, I mean, the shit that I'm about to say right now is like, they might fuck up my next fight with Sandy Ryan, but I'm going to say it one time. So if y'all are listening, y'all better screen record this shit because I'm not saying it again. So let's do the math like really quick, okay? Alicia signed a multiple fight contract with Matchroom in beginning January 2022. Multiple fights. She had 4 fights. She has a mandatory now who is Chow, right? When you have a mandatory, you don't necessarily have to have a promoter. It's like mine went to a bid. And what happened to my fight? I was supposed to fight like June 24th or something like that. I signed my contract. My opponent signed my contract, and they asked me to sign a Matchroom re-up with them for 3 more fights. I was like, let's finish this mandatory and figure out what's going to happen. What happened? Because I did not sign the contract with Matchroom, they took my opponent and gave her to Terry Harper. So at that point, I had no fight. So at that point, I had to sign back up with Matchroom for a couple more fights. With her, she got to fight Choi. And they're not saying, hey, Alicia signed another multiple fight contract. They're saying Alicia pop hot. So maybe she's not signing the contract. Maybe she's like putting Matchroom in a corner somewhere and they don't like that. So all of a sudden, quote unquote, she popped hot. Fuck out of here. So, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of shady shit that goes on. I'm out here trying to find like separate sources to get tested because I don't trust people talking about hey, go get tested with Bada.
That is former undisputed, current reigning welterweight champion Jessica McCaskill, not only extending her support to Alicia Baumgardner in this time of crisis, but also speculating that there may be more at work here than meets the eye.
She herself is distrustful of VADA as an anti-doping agency.
Even though VADA didn't actually conduct the testing for what was the Baumgardner versus Leonard 2 fight. It was a testing agency that goes by the name Drug-Free Sport that characteristically doesn't really work in boxing.
With boxers.
I've come to find out that Drug-Free Sport works more with NBA and NFL players as opposed to boxers, and that a part of the reason, at least according to Eddie Hearn, a part of the reason that Matchroom started using them is because they're more cost feasible than using VADA.
It's cheaper.
Something like that. Just expanding upon what Jessica McCaskill said and what she is implying, that because Alicia Baumgardner was approaching the end of her Matchroom deal, strange things tend to happen around that time, like testing positive for a banned substance on the premise that she might have ruffled some feathers at Matchroom.
Describing the situation that she experienced with what was then her mandatory challenger, Ivana Habazin, Jessica, in her own words, said that because she didn't sign another multi-fight deal with Matchroom straight away,
ahead of what was supposed to be the Ivana Habazin mandated title defense, what Matchroom elected to do, since Jessica didn't sign a multi-fight deal with them straight away, was they took Ivana and gave her to Terry when she was supposed to be fighting Jessica.
You will recall that there was a purse bid for what was supposed to be Habazin versus McCaskill, and you will recall that it was Ivana Habazin's promoter that won the bid, not Matchroom.
Matchroom, they didn't put up much money for the fight. It's almost like they weren't trying, and perhaps they weren't really trying to win the bid because they didn't have Jessica under contract, at least not at that time.
Matchroom's rationale might have been is, why break the bank? Why spend all this money for this fight when we don't have either of these fighters under contract?
Comes to the now defunct McCaskill versus Habazin fight. That might have been what their rationale was. It's important to note that Jessica did end up signing a multi-fight deal with them afterwards.
How does any of this relate to Alicia?
Well, it's because it sounds like what Jessica's trying to say is that because Alicia was approaching the end of her existing Matchroom deal and she had not yet signed a new one, strange things start to happen when you don't play ball.
Sabotage.
Sounds like that's what Jessica's trying to say, and I struggle with that contention because Matchroom would gain very little in sabotaging Alicia Baumgardner, and if anything, it would make them look bad. You know, Connor Ben's failed test, now Dillian White's and Alicia Baumgardner's. It's bad PR.
Bad image for the company that so many of the fighters affiliated with them are testing positive for banned substances. I just don't see what Matchroom would gain in sabotaging Alicia Baumgardner, not ruling out sabotage.
That some external force, say a rival promotional outfit, might want to sabotage one of Matchroom's fighters. I could wrap my mind around that a little better than I can wrap my mind around internal sabotage. Matchroom screwing over Alicia Baumgardner to gain what?
Because she didn't re-sign with them?
I just don't see the benefit in that for Matchroom. If we are to entertain a scenario where sabotage, where there may have been foul play, I would sooner expect external sabotage from a saboteur that rivals Matchroom than Matchroom themselves.
You make your own company look bad just to screw over Alicia?
Saying you insinuating that some shady shit could be happening because she doesn't want to re-sign with Matchroom.
That is a very large possibility. When you look on the ESPN Instagram post, people are saying, man, it's so sketchy that all the Matchroom fighters are popping hot. Maybe they're not re-signing. Maybe they're trying to separate themselves from Matchroom, and Matchroom is like, I don't think so, and start pulling like mad crazy cards. Like,
perhaps a part of the reason that so many of Matchroom's fighters are finding themselves in this situation is because Matchroom is doing more testing than the other promotional outfits. They don't seem to have an NDA with any of the anti-doping agencies like, say, Al Heyman does. I remember it was 2 or 3 years ago that Victor Conti said openly
On Twitter.
He said, my understanding is Al Heyman has requested that VADA not post the test results for his boxer, Nicaraguan Playa, Victor Conti, Guru Science, WADA AMA. Can you elaborate on why VADA doesn't publish more info? It'd be nice for them to make a lot more info public and easier to find.
May seem like Matchroom's fighters are popping hot every other weekend.
That could be because they don't have non-disclosure agreements with the anti-doping agencies the way Al Heyman seems to have one with VADA.
Had one with VADA. Don't forget that Michelle Rivera and Alberto Puello very recently pissed hot.
Those are Heyman fighters, oddly enough. Nobody lost their minds about those guys testing positive for banned substances the way they're now losing their minds when it comes to Alicia. Perhaps it's because she actually has more of a profile than they do.
Perhaps.
And perhaps a part of the reason that it seems like a lot of Matchroom's fighters are finding themselves in this situation is because Matchroom is doing more anti-doping testing than the other promotional outfits.
More tests, more adverse findings.
It's unfortunate, and it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Finally then, because I know that you push for time, one of the things, there's a channel called The Boxing Voice, Ness, an American channel, and they had both Alicia and Jessica McCaskill on the channel last night. And Jessica McCaskill, okay, your thoughts?
Absolutely the most wild thing I've ever seen in my life. I mean, they'll be hearing from us today. But, I mean, what essentially, you know, Jessica McCaskill said, and I don't mind repeating it because it's one of the most bizarre things ever, is Alicia had one fight left on her contract. So maybe this was Matchroom trying to disrupt her. I mean, are you absolutely... I mean, firstly, that is the most offensive thing I think I've ever heard in my life. And secondly, the most defamatory thing I've ever heard in my life for our company. You think a global business of our side that has aspirations to float in an IPO, what sort of process happens? You go to an agency that represents the NBA, the NFL, the NCAA, NASCAR, the LPGA, and make up a test result. Are you I mean, I know we live in a world of conspiracy theories, but that is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. And I'll be speaking to Jessica because it's bang out of order. You know.
It was the very wise and powerful October Red who asked Eddie Hearn about what Jessica said last night on The Boxing Voice. I will leave October Red's full interview, the link to it, in the comment section.
She's good.
It wasn't smart of Jessica to say that publicly. It wasn't smart of Jessica to go on The Boxing Voice at the height of this story when it's getting the most attention and make an accusation like this, because you're essentially saying Matchroom is sabotaging their own fighters. That is defamatory and could damage their reputation.
It was unwise to say that when your very next fight is going to be fought under the Matchroom banner.
Jessica's rationale was that because she had not entered into another multi-fight deal with Matchroom, Matchroom took offense and decided to poach poach Ivana Habazin and feed her to a fighter they do have under contract in Terry Harper. That was Jessica's rationale.
Which was flawed.
Essentially, she's accusing them of sabotaging what was supposed to be the Ivana Habazin fight, not realizing perhaps it was Ivana that wanted to fight Terry on the premise that Matchroom would have paid her more money to fight Terry than she stood to make with Jessica.
Ivana Habazin's promoter won the purse bid for the Jessica McCaskill fight, and it wasn't for a lot of money.
Matchroom themselves, they put in a bid as well, alongside Ivana Habazin's promoter, but Matchroom's bid was very small. It's almost like they weren't trying, and why would they? They didn't have either of these fighters under contract at that time.
They weren't invested.
Sometime later, news breaks that Ivana will instead be fighting Terry Harper at 154 instead of Jessica McCaskill at 147. And when I saw that, I thought to myself, why is Ivana electing to fight Terry instead of Jessica if she's Jessica's mandatory? And it's likely because fighting Terry would have got her more money than fighting Jessica.
Simple.
It's really not Matchroom sabotaging your fight. That's Ivana Habazin pursuing a bigger purse than you can give her, than she'd get fighting you.
Making the idea that Matchroom sabotaged her fighter, Matchroom sabotaged Alicia's test, a preposterous idea.
It's not me ruling out the possibility that there could be a saboteur, theoretically, but it would be an external saboteur, not an internal one.
Not Matchroom themselves.
Matchroom's got enough enemies. They don't need to hurt their own image.
Got enough people that want to do that. The idea that espionage, corporate espionage, might be in play to some degree here, I wouldn't rule it out.
If any of you happen to catch Ben Shalom's recent statements on what was supposed to be Opataya versus Reactpour, why they pulled their fighter Richard Reactpour out of that purse bid, I don't know if Matchroom has even signed Jai Opataya or if it was purely to mess us around. That's how Ben Shalom feels.
Feels that Matchroom is trying to sabotage him.
Every fight that we try and make, there's a conscious effort to try and stop it, try and block it.
Feels that Matchroom is trying to sabotage him.
So if he feels that Matchroom is trying to sabotage him, why wouldn't he in turn try to sabotage them? If we're putting our thinking caps on here and expanding our horizons. Shalom gave examples of Matchroom attempting to make Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn for September 23rd, whilst Eubank versus Smith 2 was being rescheduled. Similarly, Dan Aziz was offered a world title shot against Dimitri Bivol, according to Hearn, when Boxer were attempting to make a Buatsi versus Aziz fight. We got offered to go to Australia, and we asked for proof of funds, and the proof of the government funding, that never came. Even if it seemed like Jai had signed with Matchroom,
This is all according to Ben.
we received an offer from his manager saying Matchroom aren't involved. This is the number. We'll come to the UK, just offer us XYZ. We made the offer, we sent over the contract, and silence again. We always felt like Richard can choose. He'll fight for a world title this year. He's number one in the WBO. Most of the titles are free to fight for, and he'll fight for a world title.
Yeah, but if you made it to that point with Jai Opataya, to where it's the day of the purse bid, why did you then decide to pull him out? Why didn't you pull him out ahead of time?
Why'd you pull Fraser Clark out of what was supposed to be the purse bid for the Fabio Wortley fight? And why'd you pull Richard Reactpour out of the purse bid that was supposed to be for the Jai Opataya fight? Why'd you do that?
Why?
And we all know why. It's because you're afraid that if you get into a bidding war with Matchroom, they'll win, you'll lose, and your fighter will have to cross the street. So rather than deal with that, what you choose to do is explore other options.
Pull him out of the purse bid. Have him fight somebody else.
Ben Shalom continued, it got to the point where we were being messed up. I don't know if Matchroom has even signed Jai Opataya or if it was purely to mess us around. Ultimately, we made the best decision for Richard, and we hope that the games stop.
I'll tell you this much. Ben's got to get his head out of his ass because Jai Opataya himself confirmed he's now working with Matchroom. They're co-promoting him outside of Australia.
There's no reason for Ben Shalom to not know that Jai's pact with Matchroom is very much real, because Jai confirmed it himself. What rock has Ben Shalom been living under? He wants to give off the impression that it's Matchroom messing Boxer about when it really is the other way around. Boxer has been targeting Matchroom fighters specifically, from the very beginning. Look at the fighters that ended up crossing over. Savannah Marshall, April Hunter, Lawrence Okoli, Joshua Buatsi, Chris Billum-Smith, and Liam Smith.
When Matchroom parted ways with Sky Sports, it was Ben Shalom's job to try to fill that void. And the best way he could do that was trying to rebuild the house that Eddie Hearn built by targeting Eddie's fighters. And he's been doing that for well over a year now.
It's very much deliberate that if anybody is playing saboteur here, it really is Ben Shalom more than Eddie. And Eddie is just reciprocating the energy that Ben's been giving him.
Tell him Porky Pies.
Is Jai Opataya signed to Matchroom as a co-promoter or not?
Yes, co-promoter with Tasman Fighters. So we actually had some fun and games on it this morning, because I saw Boxer's interview yesterday, Ben Shalom, where he said, we pulled out the purse bid on the day.
This is with Riakpur now, yeah?
Because we had another World Championship opportunity.
Must be Billum Smith.
And they were messing. No, it's just rubbish. They emailed Mick Francis from Tasman Fighters today saying, don't tell Eddie Hearn we're contacting you, but would you like to make the Richard Riakpur fight on September 30th? This is after pulling out of the purse bids. So it's all absolute rubbish. And, of course, my co-promoter sent it to me immediately, like he wasn't going to. And I just dropped Boxer a line and said, someone must have hacked your email, because I saw the interview yesterday and you said you pulled out of that fight because you got another World Championship opportunity. You were telling Porky Pies, weren't you? Because you just didn't want to go to purse bid. They also know that they can't challenge for the title now because they've withdrawn their position of mandatory challenger. So anyway.
So what will happen with Jai now?
He's probably going to fight Bradis.
Over there or
in
here?
Australia,
yeah.
or wherever.
Which promoted you and DAZN.
Yeah, and that's who he's been called to fight right now.
If it's the way that Eddie Hearn says it is, and they tried to do a deal independently between Boxer and Tasman Fighters in order to cut Matchroom and DAZN out of the deal, that only communicates the ineptitude of Ben Shalom.
Because it's too late. Jai is under orders to fight Bradis again.
Are you having trouble doing the CBS fight for Richard? The rematch, I should say, since Richard already beat him years ago, years later. Are you struggling to make that fight? Why would you revisit a Jai Opataya fight after you walked away from it, walked away from the purse bid?
They're all professional rivals over there across the pond. Eddie Hearn, Ben Shalom, Frank Warren. But Ben Shalom doesn't seem to have the interest in Frank Warren's boys that he has in Eddie's.
He says that it's Matchroom trying to mess him about, but it really looks like it's the other way around, if you've been paying attention. And I feel like Ben is just projecting what he's doing onto Eddie, onto Matchroom.
It's supposed to be a coincidence to Savannah Marshall, April Hunter, Natasha Jonas, Lawrence Okoli, Joshua Buatsi, Chris Billum-Smith, Liam Smith.
You went after those fighters. You did it deliberately. When you were looking to fill the void left behind by Matchroom's absence, what you tried to do was rebuild Matchroom in your own image.
I don't think it's really Matchroom trying to sabotage Ben so much as Ben has been trying to sabotage Matchroom with little success. The idea that Eddie Hearn has that many enemies
may grow into saboteurs. It's not far-fetched.
It's entirely plausible from where I'm sitting.